What happens when law, business, and life collide? Each week on Lead Counsel, your host Tom Tona will take a deep dive into topics related to the law, the business of law, and life. There will be insightful discussions with industry insiders, experts, and thought leaders making significant contributions and meaningful differences in their fields of expertise. Tom is the founder and managing attorney at TonaLaw. He has been a practicing attorney since 1994 and the leader of TonaLaw since it opened in 2001. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with free information on law and the business of law, and to give you actionable tools related to each of these areas. Now, here's Tom.
I have my good friend, Neal Goldstein, who I love Neal, right? I met him at a mastermind, at John Fisher's mastermind. Neal, I'm going to start this story with this. I had a fantastic month by anybody's measure, right? I put on more on the sheet than some people will make in 2 years, 3 years of running a law practice. I was very blessed. And I felt nothing after it. I woke up today excited. Because I knew I was going to talk to you. I do truly, truly value our relationship. And I know it's still at the beginning stages of our relationship. But Jules, I'll tell you what's happened and how I met Neal. I had heard about Neal's name through the mastermind circles I was in. And by the way, his name is Neal Goldstein. You know, he's the author of Who's in the Waiting Room, which I love. And we're going to get into the book and all of that stuff. But I met him finally at John Fisher's mastermind. And immediately, I love Neal's authenticity, right? Him and another guy named Bill Umansky, we were in a group together, and they are so authentic, and they are so good at the questions they ask and their listening ability that the minute you meet somebody like Neal, like all of a sudden you just become excited to be able to send a guy like Neal a text or have lunch with Neal. So Neal, I know this was kind of a fakakta way to start this thing, but
I gotta tell you, I'm gonna figure out a way to miniaturize you, put you in my pocket, and whenever I go meet somebody, I'm pulling you out, because that was a beautiful introduction. Thank you very much. I'm truly humbled. Wow.
It wasn't until today I woke up and I was excited. And so here's why I think it's awesome. Neal, to me, changed my game. He changed my game. He gave us an introduction to the first mastermind I saw him at John Fisher's mastermind. And he changed the trajectory of my thought process and my law firm, to be honest with you, because Neal hammers home the importance of relationships. And here I am with more blessings than any man can count. And I felt nothing. And yet I'm waking up today super excited to talk to Neal. And I was like, look, I don't care what I have to change around. I'm not missing this podcast today. I was excited, Neal, because of what you bring to my life. Even in the little time I know you, we know each other less than a year, but the concept of what you wrote about in your book, Who's in the Waiting Room, available on Amazon for anybody that hasn't read it, they should. It reoriented me. You as a person reoriented me in the practice of law, the way I practice, and my vision and my mission. So Neal, welcome to the Lead Counsel podcast. I'm excited to have you.
What a lead in. Wow. I don't know how to respond to that other than to say that I'm blessed with meeting people like you. I have to tell you, this is the God's honest truth. And I've told this to a number of people. One of the reasons that I used to go to John Fisher's group, and I still do, obviously, is because there weren't many New Yorkers there, many New York lawyers there. And it was nice, not because I was concerned about competitiveness or anything like that, competition. That's not the issue. There's a certain culture with New York lawyers that we have. All of us have it. Many have it much worse than others. And when I was introduced to you, Tom, I said, "Oh boy." But then when Tom started speaking, I said, "I don't know this guy," and I thought I knew a lot of lawyers on the island. And this guy sounds really, really good. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and he sounded like he was really in touch, and you were very giving. That's all I'm going to say. You were very giving. You were very vulnerable. And I found that quite unusual, but for any lawyer. But honestly, New York lawyers don't usually do that. And so I connected with you right away.
Right. And that's how I felt about you, that you really, Neal, I'm not an easy guy to be vulnerable, right? Like I'm just not. However, I am where people lead with vulnerability. People lead with authenticity, right? Jules is a great example of that. Like we have a really authentic relationship. Like you said, Neal, you lead with authenticity. That's why I love you, Mansky, right? The guy,
for sure.
The guy is authentically Bill.
Yes.
And like, I love it. And so, you know, listen, I've read the book. I've listened to you on other podcasts. I mean, the story you told about your upbringing was special. And I think what's special about you also is it takes real courage to share your story. And I know that you talk about that. It's a chapter in your book and you talk about it at Masterminds, the importance of sharing your story. So I have questions out of the gate. It's not so much talking about your book, but, and again, dude, I've freed up 2 hours. I'll talk to you for as long as you want. If I got to cut it into 2 episodes, I will. But so one, you got me thinking, and I'm listening to you as I'm working out this morning, and you got me thinking about the role of trauma and how trauma influenced your personal and professional development. So my question for you would be, you know, you went through some pretty traumatic stuff. How do you see that intersecting with your personal and professional development and who you are today, the trauma you went through and how it's informed everything about who you are?
Yeah. So, you know, I go back to Steve Jobs, who obviously, you know, was the founder of Apple, did one of the best commencement speeches that I ever saw. Did either of you guys ever see that?
I've seen so many of his.
I think I know what you're talking about.
So
I've seen a lot of his speeches.
All you have to type is type in YouTube is Steve Jobs commencement speech, and it's great. And in essence, he goes through his own story, which is why we love, you know, people love stories, right? Because, you know, we loved it when we were children. We loved it as we got older. We love listening to them, especially with people that we admire, because they then share often their vulnerability, and we become even more connected with them. And Steve Jobs said, who I never liked from a business point of view, he was not a nice guy to his employees, to his partners, and he wasn't the best of spouses. Okay, all you have to do is watch the TV show, and you'll know that.
Right, the movie, yeah.
Right. But I guess when he was diagnosed with cancer, he maybe certain things became real to him, and he started sharing his story a lot more. And one of the things he said in that commencement speech was, you know, when I when I was thrown out of school, college, I didn't understand why. When I got kicked out of Apple the first time around, I didn't understand why. But it's only when you can look back, and you start connecting all the dots, that you can understand how your life has evolved and where you are today. Sure, it wasn't easy. I had a very tough upbringing, and I'm very grateful to all the people that helped me along the way. And when I look back, honestly, I wouldn't change one moment, because if it wasn't for those traumatic moments, I wouldn't be the person who I am today. I wouldn't be the father that I am today. Certainly a much better father, not even in the same category as what I grew up with. I wouldn't be the lawyer that I am today. I wouldn't be the advocate that I am today if it wasn't for my mother having, you know, a chronic illness at a time when nobody knew what to do with somebody like her. And I had to run to, as a teenager, to Medicare and Social Security administrative agencies to advocate for her. If I wasn't thrown into that fire, I just wouldn't be the human being that I am today. So there's no question that there is a direct correlation between that and who I am today, no matter what hat I'm wearing.
100%. And I knew I wanted to start it with that question because while it is a tough question, right? Like it's the kind of question that will kind of kick the wind out of you.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that to you, but I come from trauma, right? I don't talk about it a lot. But it made me who I am, right? So mine's a little bit different. I have familial growing up trauma, but then I also on top of that compounded with significant severe bullying. And it made me who I am today, right? Wow. That black belt that hangs on the wall at 5'7" and 150 pounds, blood, sweat, and tears, right? Right. But it also informed my professional choices, right? And those professional choices, you use the word advocating, and you are the definition of a personal injury advocate, right? I don't consider you a competitor. We were talking about the Mastermind experience. In fact, you changed so much about my practice vision, and you probably don't even realize it, right? Like, and I'll tell you just a quick story. We were doing an EOS exercise. They're like, what's your vision? Of course, at first, the businessman inside of me is like, I want to be an 8-figure law firm. Okay. And then I was like, no, that's not it. That's not it. I want to do great things for my clients. That's more along the lines. Wait. It's about the clients. And I know what we are. We're not a personal injury firm. We're a personal injury trial firm. Changed everything. But here's what I owe to you. I have often repeated since our meeting, I want to be the lawyer and law firm that, God forbid, I was a paraplegic, or God forbid, I was the dead party, my wife would hire that law firm. And now I have my vision complete. And it is exactly thanks to people like you, the Bill Umanskis of the world, and the Ryan McKeans of the world, my vision became crystal clear, right? It's about the client. It's about who's in the waiting room.
Oh, for sure. And,
right.
That drives people like you, and it drives people like me, and drives other people that we know. And, with that in mind, we're still the minority amongst lawyers, which is okay. I mean, that's fine. But it is a tremendous driving force.
And look, I'd rather be in the minority.
And
right.
Here's the thing, by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I don't say it, I'm going to forget it.
Please.
Are you familiar with the term force multiplier?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But explain it because,
I'll explain it as best as I can. And if I'm off a little bit, then you could tell me where I'm off, but I'll tell you why I'm using that term here. Force multiplier, I understood it to be, it was a military term when it was originated. And it was the idea that there are things that you can use in war. That was the original version of it. That might take a battalion 2 weeks and lots of injuries and deaths to complete. This one tool that could be used in war can complete that very quickly. And it's a military term. And what I think that where I use the term force multiplier, let's say in your situation or in my situation, having gone through the trauma that you went through, having gone through the challenges that I went through, that was a force multiplier in who we are today. If not, but for whatever legal words you want to use,
right?
But for those moments in your life, you would not be doing what you're doing today with the same intensity, the same passion,
or the same way, or the same way. Right.
And that's not to put anybody down who hasn't gone through these challenges that you have, but in all likelihood, your journey to where you are today has come a bit easier, if I could say that, than the guy that didn't have to go through what you went through. When I say easier, I don't mean that you had it easy, but the vision became clear at some point. This is my journey. This is what I want to do. And so that's why I call it a force multiplier.
100%. And I think that being in the rooms that's the multiplier for me, right? Like, so for me, I might have stumbled upon the same epiphanies, right? Or you might have stumbled upon the same epiphanies, but it's that chemistry of your. All of a sudden, I'm in the room, didn't know Neal from anything. Hear Neal speak. If I wasn't in the room, it might have taken me 6 months more. So it is a force multiplier being in those rooms. And Juliet, you're in a lot of different rooms now, right? Like I have you attending masterminds and I have you doing all of these different things.
That's great.
Because it is a multiplier. You'll see, Jules, how things all of a sudden there's new relationships, new epiphanies that you have. So yeah, I love the term force multiplier in that context, Neal, that you're using it because everybody that's in that mastermind, something about John Fisher's mastermind is magic. I can't put my finger on it, but man.
Well, it does come from the top. He's a vulnerable guy. He talks about no bullshit. He talks about, leave the ego at the doorstep.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear that. And it's not that we don't want to hear good things or your wins or your victories, but let's be real. We all don't have them. And so I think he sets the tone. And over time, I think this mastermind has gained a reputation for being authentic, real, genuine.
But the breakthroughs that it leads to in the weeks and months and even years that follow, right?
Yeah. And it's just the influence of the people around you. Tom always says you're the sum of the people closest to you. And Neal, I know that you often mention relationships as your number one asset as well. So I think it's just that core value or that core idea that relationships and the people that you surround yourself with can really bring you to new heights and really influence you in different ways.
Right. So could you imagine a bunch of people who think the same way sitting in a room, not trying to outdo each other, not trying to, show you who's got the best muscle, but somebody who's there to try to help you, whether it's through, supporting you, critiquing you in some way, in a constructive way. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. Unfortunately, as I said, this is not common to lawyers. And I talk about this all the time. Ego gets in the way of many lawyers and their true success.
Yeah, because it's, ego is a liar, right? Ego is a liar. And so the funny thing is I always say I joined jujitsu late in life. I was 38 at the time. And, man, you want to be humbled real fast. I had all of these other achievements with martial arts and all of this other ego-fed wins in my career and all of that. And nobody cares on the mat. The mat tells the truth every time. And the best part of it was that it kills your ego, right? So that's what I do love about the mastermind. But yeah, it's been transformational. I'm not going to be at the one in April, and I'm sorry about that because I'm going to be in San Diego at the EOS thing for a week. So I'm missing John's thing, but it was really a blessing to have met you. And so, again, knowing your story, there's a couple of things that stood out, that all of these things that you wove together in this memoir that you wrote, and I want to touch on some things and kind of free flow with it. So share the story about the Chinese food incident. Why was it formative to you?
I'm going to say I was 14, maybe. I don't remember the exact age. My father was still in the home. He didn't abscond probably for another year. And at that point, there was lots of tension going on in the house. My mother was not walking well. She was walking very slow with a walker. And my father was this big, physically big guy. And so when he walked, you heard him. When he walked, he was right on top of you. He was a big man. And I'm a little guy. So, it's hard to imagine that. And he had said, I don't remember exactly how it went down, but he probably said, let's all go out for Chinese food. And I thought that was great because I didn't I never got a chance to go out with my parents together much at all. And so we said, sure. So my mother used her walker to move from the apartment that we lived in. It was a 6-story building, down to the garage where the car was parked. We got out of the elevator. He was way ahead, never walked with her, walked way ahead of her, not like right in front of her, but way ahead of her. And I was kind of in the middle, right? Not knowing, should I walk with him or walk with her? And at some point, you could see he was getting impatient because she was walking very slow. And at some point, he says, "I'm going. I can't wait anymore." And he said to me, "You come with me." And I looked at my mother, and she says, "Go ahead, go. It's okay. Don't worry about it." And I did go, and it was a tough moment because, now that I think of it now as a parent, right? Years later, you say to yourself, "What, how much did I hurt this woman?" And I kind of saw it as I saw it like I was abandoning her, and it never left my mind. You could see from the way I'm telling you the story, and probably from, I'm a vulnerable guy, so I can get emotional very easy. You know, that moment stayed with me for a very long time, and I'm grateful to whomever you want to believe in. I'm grateful that I was able to turn it around and help my mother make her life uh, much better in her later years. But that was a difficult one.
How old were you at the time?
I'm thinking I was about 14, maybe.
So, yeah, one of the reasons why that story stuck with me is, again, having my own trauma.
Sure.
The role in the formative years and how it defines you, right? So like, yeah, I can see the look on your face, and none of these questions, by the way, are meant to evoke, pain.
No,
but,
I have no problem talking about
you've talked about him before and
Yeah.
what it led to, right? Like the fact that it's so ingrained in your memory, and watching your face and knowing now how empathetic you are, how fast forward all these years later, the way it's influenced you again. So we talked about the word trauma influence lawyering versus now defining it and what it meant to you. But I can also see why hundreds or thousands of your clients, 30, 40 years into how long have you been practicing law?
Almost 40 years.
40 years. And you know what? I know why clients still refer people to you that were with you 20, 30 years ago. Right? Because you leave this indelible impression of caring, concern, and empathy. And so, yeah, I mean, look, there's no doubt about it. The imagery you just painted of literally being in between two parents, I can relate to that. There's a lot of people who can relate to that image, whether they came from a product of divorce or alcoholism, whatever it is. And it's in sharing that story that is your superpower, right? That is why you have this huge heart, the ability, you call it listening with heart, right? There is not a transactional bone in your body, which is why I love you, man. It's why people love you, because when you say, "How are you doing?" to somebody, you actually mean it. And you made me better because of it, because I got so caught up in business and winning and all of that. Like, it's easy to lose sight.
I think, I don't know if I told you this when we met last time, but a few months ago, I had to go to a memorial service at a cemetery, and it was out here on the island, and I think it's on Cemetery Row in Pine Lawn or something. And before we started, it was a nice day, and I'm looking around, and there's thousands of headstones there. And I look at all of them. All of them are different, right? They're all different sizes, shapes, whatever. But there's one thing that they all don't have. There's one thing that they all are missing. And what's missing? What's missing is how much money the person made, how much, what kind of car they drove, what neighborhood they lived in. None of that is on those. Not one stone has that on there.
Right.
And yet, but what is on there? Great parent, great spouse, wonderful brother, great, very charitable. Well, something about charity or philanthropic. Great teacher. All those things that once we're no longer here, because there will be a time, a day, a moment when we won't be here any longer. That's what people will remember. They're not going to remember, this is the guy that had those really nice Oriental rugs in his office,
Right.
This is the guy that had the conference room that's all teched out. By the way, nothing wrong with those things. I'm not saying you shouldn't have it, but let's put it in its right place.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that being real with your clients, and often I've now consider them not even my clients anymore. I consider them their partners. When we have a case together, that's my partner. That's
Right.
my partner on a case.
Right.
And often after that relationship is over, we still have another relationship that's going on. So
yeah, and it's funny because you did say that cemetery story to me when we had lunch at the Italian restaurant.
Sorry.
And no. Listen, I want my listeners to hear that because it's a really important lesson. It had the same effect on me the first time you said it. I was kind of dumbstruck, silent, because it's a stark reminder of what's really important, right? You go into the heart of it. You go into the relationship aspect. And especially there's a lot of lawyers that listen to this. Mental health for lawyers is probably at an all-time low, right? The suicide rates, addiction rates among lawyers is at an all-time low. And yet the one thing every mental health expert will tell you is it's about the relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the money. It's not about the net worth. It's not about it's what you're going to be, who you're going to be remembered by.
Right.
I don't ever need to be famous. As long as my wife and my daughter talk about me the way I talk about my dad, I'm good.
Right.
So you have talked about a bunch of pivotal things, and I remember this stuff when you were talking about it at the Mastermind. So you talked about another instance where you met somebody, and I think I'm going to butcher this if I'm not saying it right. B'nai B'rith?
Oh, B'nai B'rith.
B'nai B'rith. Okay. Now, I'm Catholic. I don't know what that is. So explain for people B'nai B'rith and the significance of that first initial meeting with the person from B'nai B'rith, because it kind of laid the pavement for everything else.
Yeah. So just to better understand what B'nai B'rith is, it's like CYO a little bit. It's a youth organization for Jewish kids who want to get together and socialize, or whatever they, it has a religious umbrella, but it's really not about religious ideology. It's about just getting together and socializing and making relationships. But when I dropped out of high school, at least for the first 6 months, I was kind of walking around, really doing nothing. And so I was walking the neighborhood one day while everybody else is in school, and I came across a building. I recognized the building. It was a place that I went to kindergarten. I figured, okay, let me just walk in there. I have nothing else to do. I walked in there. It looked the same as I remembered when I was a kid in kindergarten, whatever. And I was looking in the atrium. It was a see-through atrium. So I was looking at it, and I get a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and I see this young guy, looked like a cool young guy. Maybe he was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s. His name was Phil. And he said, can I help you? Now, I'm 16. And I said, no, I'm just looking. I don't know what I said. I'm 16. You're awkward on how you respond to things. I said something like, I'm just looking. I went to kindergarten here, and I'm just looking at the atrium. He said, okay. He says, don't you go to school? And I said, and right away I'm thinking, oh, okay, what am I going to say now? I said, no, I'm not the school kind of guy. And without making any judgments or anything, he just had this really nice smile on his face, and he said, that's okay. And that was the beginning of my first real adult relationship with somebody that I could really talk to. He was a social worker for the JCC, with Jewish Community Center, and we started developing a relationship. Ultimately, he uh, convinced me, knowing this, the situation I was in, he convinced me to join or to at least attend a few meetings at B'nai B'rith, which met in the building that we were in. And I said, okay. I kind of was like, I don't want to be with a bunch of Jewish kids in this group. It just kind of felt like nerdy and like it's not something I really want. How stupid I was, because that really changed my life. And so when I walked in there, which is why I always say, find your tribe, find your tribe. Uh, so when I walked in there, and after a couple of meetings, I kind of felt comfortable with everybody, and after they saw that I was getting involved, at some point I was asked, because the president was stepping down, the president of the chapter. They said, "Would you want to run for president?" And that was the beginning of a massive. It was a massive turnaround for me.
So I can see you getting emotional, and I just want to say thank you for telling that story. The reason why it's so important is, and I want to sum this up with the words you used. First of all, I don't know if you realize that when you're talking, the amount of notes I'm taking with because Neal, there's so much to be learned by you, by so many, because in a time when technology makes it easier to connect, real connection is lost, right? So you used the word before, and I'm writing this stuff down. You used the word judgment. The guy didn't judge you. How many times we sit in that room, somebody's a first timer at that table in the hot seat, and they're judging people around the table. I have no idea who these people are.
Right.
And that's rooted in biology, by the way. That's rooted in your genetic encoding, is to judge somebody as like you or different from you as a survival mechanism.
Right.
And I've become a better person, I think, where I'm always trying to tune in on, am I judging somebody based upon differences? I'm just constantly asking myself that. And the fact that you're willing to share that raw story, and still it has that emotional impact on you, because I knew it changed your life. That one person who took the time to connect with young Neal, not only did he change your life, he's changed everybody's life that you come into contact with decades later, my man. Decades later. You changed my life. You changed people's lives in that room that day when you cut through the bullshit of, I think I said something, and I'll be vulnerable for a second. I was talking about a really problematic stress I was feeling, and you asked me this question. It's kind of haunted me. You said, "Does your wife know?" And now my wife, she never listens to this, but Jules, you know my wife. Mm-hmm. And I said, "No, man, I don't talk about this stuff with my wife." And you were like, stop. You go home. You talk about this stuff with your wife. This is a person that you married to 15 years. And I guarantee you, I'm not the only guy like that, where I thought I was shielding them from the stress, which is why men, they got to go home. They got to talk to their spouse. They got to share this stuff.
Well,
right?
Bingo. You got it, because, I think I touched upon it in the book, but I know I did a few videos on this, and the fact of the matter is, you can't separate. You can't, unless you're a superhuman being, and few of us are. You can't separate home life from work life. You could say that. People like to say that I leave my shit at home, or I leave my my problems at work, whatever the situation is. Bullshit. Because if something happens in one area, it's got to take something away from the other area, especially if it's consistent and over time. And let's be honest. Yes, you just married somebody, one of the deepest and most soulful relationships that we can have. We could talk about relationships all we want, but one of the deepest relationships you could have is when you get married, right? And how do you not share what goes on 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day in your life with your partner. And I'm not just saying, oh, did you hear who, somebody got somebody's
Right.
birthday today. Nobody, not talking about that.
The real stuff. The real stuff.
Real stuff. Oh, honey, our checking account is really low.
Right.
We haven't settled the case in a month and a half, and I'm getting nervous. Why? Why can't you say that? Why can't you say that? Why? Because it would make you look less of a person.
I think, like, for
I'm
me,
not talking to you, by the way.
No. I get you, but again, I speak to a lot of my inner circle people on a regular, and I know Craig Goldenfarb has his wife speaking at the 7-figure thing coming up because, I can only speak as a man that for me, it's a exterior shell of strength that you want to shield your family from. But what you said so brilliantly at the mastermind, and you've said it to me before, is listen, man, if you think she don't know something's wrong, she knows. Because when you're up pacing the floor at 2 a.m., guess who's also awake, just laying there quietly?
That's 100% right. Let me tell you something else. Almost from a marketing point of view, think about this. I know you may not, maybe the connection isn't that clear, but think about this, because I agree with you. I think it's almost genetically part of, especially for a man, to feel like they have to shield their family from certain difficulties that might be going on in another part of their life. But what I say is that it makes you stronger and it makes you more of a man when you do share those things. Look, every so often, if you look inside a magazine, you'll see a really good-looking male model holding a little baby. Have you ever seen those pictures?
Yeah, of course.
Good-looking guy.
Jules has them all over her office.
maybe it's a bare-chested guy and he's holding a baby. Why is that picture so attractive to women? Why?
It's strength and vulnerability at the same time.
Right. What? And it's no different than a man being vulnerable, with his emotions. And when a man is vulnerable with his emotions, that is attractive. Now, and I'm just speaking just certainly in terms of physical attractiveness. But beyond that, this is your partner in life. Share what you need to share, period.
Right.
This is it's your business. Whether she's legally a partner or not is irrelevant. She owns part of that business, man.
Yeah.
She's helped you develop that business.
100%. I always say, like, for the younger attorneys that are listening to this, if they're single, the single most important thing that you're ever going to do in life is who you choose as your spouse. So choose wisely. I talk to Jules about it all the time. I'm like, she's got an awesome boyfriend. I know him, but I'm like, look, man, you worry about all of these different things. The single most important decision you'll ever make is the spouse that you go home to every night, and they are a partner. They are your partner.
And here's the other thing: if you ever read the book, The Millionaire Next Door, Yep. I forgot his name, Thomas. Forgot his last name. One of the things that he says, one of the two decisions that are most important in your financial life, is where you live and with whom you marry.
Yes.
Because if you're not rowing in the same direction, if you don't have the same values and relationships with money, then you have a problem.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know what's funny? Let's the one thing you said that I just love more than anything, when you said you're always talking about find your tribe. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, I don't know which came first, because the mastermind uses that all the time. I don't know if they got it from you or you got it from them, but the idea of tribe, there's a book out there by, I want to say Sebastian Younger, maybe, and maybe it just comes with age, right? Where maturity, where at 55, I look at things way differently than I did at 25. Right.
Right.
But to me, I go, my most important thing now is the people. It's always been the people, but you get caught up in the other stuff, right? That find your tribe has been instrumental. And now I've been to almost every one of these masterminds with John's group and Craig's group. Because meeting people like you, Bill Umansky. Like, I'm going down to Florida for something. The first person I'm texting, I'm like, Bill, we got to get together for dinner. I got to meet up with you, right? So I think it's such a great message. And that's why I wasn't joking when I know that you have a millennial mentoring program that you have a website, you have an online class. And that's the other thing I love about you. Like, your hustle is still that straight New York hustle, man. Like, how old are you? You mind me asking?
No, I'm 61.
Yeah. And you're hustling like you're 25, right?
I've said to my son, who, he's a nice kid and all, and I love my son. We have a great relationship, but he's not me. He's not me. And that's okay. By the way, that was one of the most difficult things as a parent, to realize that your kids are not you. They are not you. And I'm glad that he didn't have to go through the shit that I had to go through. But, he went through his own crap because his mom passed away. But, he doesn't have this. I don't think he has the same fire in the belly that I have.
Well, I was just going to ask you.
But he's got shit that I did not have at his age.
But do you think, like, so and I'm not sure where I heard you say this, but I did hear you say, like, so these transformative moments you have because of trauma, and I'll speak from my own personal experience. You can either become the same type of parent or the exact polar opposite. And so you and I know we have that in common, are the exact polar opposite of certain respects of what we grew up with. Right.
Yeah.
But I wonder, because I see it in my own daughter, and I know she'll someday she'll listen to this after I'm gone, hopefully. But I know my own daughter, she's got it way easier. So then you wonder if it softens that next generation. And maybe that's just part of it. Maybe that's just part of the deal. Like, you can't undo what you do.
I think that's looking at it very realistically. I think that, they're not going to have the same journey as you. Right. They may have a different journey.
Right.
They may have it. And the point is, when, it's very tough because of what we went through. When we see our kids going through a difficult moment or a difficult time, we want to right away go out and grab them, help them, whatever we can. And I'm not saying we shouldn't support them in some way, but they're on a journey. If they fall, it's not always the right thing to go and pick them up.
Right.
If they don't learn how to pick themselves up, they're going to fall again. And so at some point, I'm not talking about when a kid is a little kid, but at some point as they're getting older, they have to learn survival techniques.
Yeah.
And yes, you and I learned survival techniques.
Too young.
Way too young.
Yeah.
And too much trauma. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to learn it along the way also.
Right.
I see both my kids have had to learn survival techniques in different ways than me. And not easy. I'm far from the best parent. But, I've tried to give them the space to kind of figure things out for themselves.
Yeah. And it's another one of those crazy journeys to today, right? Like, when we talk, or I listen to you talk, and I go, man, you start to reflect back. And I think that comes with age, where you go, man, I never thought that this was going to be so impactful on the next 40 years after I experienced it at 20 or at a 15 or whatever. It's an interesting journy, like Neal said.
When I re-met my second wife, it's just going to take a few minutes, but it's
go ahead, please. What's her name?
Gina. It's a good story. So I met originally Gina in B'nai B'rith. She was a girls' chapter, and we were going out for 3 or 4 months. We lived kind of in the same area, except that she lived in the rich area and I lived in the poor area. Let's just say that. And but she liked me. Maybe she thought I was like a bad boy because I dropped out of high school, and she liked that. Whatever. She was a smart, bright young girl, and I think her mother saw that who I was, or I met her mother once, and I think she probably told her daughter, maybe this isn't the right kid to be hanging around with. I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't hurt anybody. I just was lost. And that was very obvious. And And she was very nice to me, always very, very nice to me. And so she went on her way, I went on my way. And then 35 years later, when I was going through, a traumatic divorce, and she already had been divorced, I was on Facebook and I said, Gina, do you know me? Do you remember me, Neal Goldstein? And at that very moment, uh, her daughters were, I don't know where they were. I'm not sure if they were in the other part of the house. And she looked at the face and the hair, which there wasn't any anymore. And she said, well, the guy looks familiar, but I'm not really sure if this is. And before she responded, she looked at my profile and looked to see like who I'm connected with. And she saw something at Bar Association, Lawyers Group, whatever. And she just started crying because she said, this guy did it. This guy made it. And I'm not saying it to pat myself on the back, but what she said was exactly what you said, Tom. And she said to her children, she said, this guy had one of two roads he was going to go down. He was going to either be a victim of his circumstances, or he was going to overcome the challenges. And look what this guy did. And 5-6 years later, we got married. And
That's awesome.
It was a great story, and it's a great opening for a movie, wouldn't you say?
I would, man. Listen, I hope there is a movie in the making, man. I hope that happens.
Well, speaking of, how
Yeah.
did you take the circumstances you had being a high school dropout, and transform that into becoming the lawyer you are today? I know B'nai Brith, am I saying that right? Yeah. B'nai Brith obviously helped put you on a different path, but how did you end up becoming a lawyer?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, because it's, I can't say there was one key moment. There's a lot of key moments. That's the point. There's a lot of key moments along the way. And the book, honestly, and my life and what I tried to express in the book, it's not really about what I've done. It's really the celebration of other people, other human beings that embraced me. And yeah, so I went through moments when I thought I wanted to go into healthcare, obviously related to my mother's situation, right? I wanted to go into, it was going to be physical therapist. Then I realized I couldn't do that. I wasn't very good at that. And I think I wanted to be a hospital administrator. And then I spoke to my brother, who was my last best friend in my life. And I said to him, what do you think I should do? And he says, why don't you think about law school? And when he said it, I kind of thought about it, and it resonated with me. And I think it resonated with me. And I'm saying this now, and I can't say it with any certainty, but I think that it resonated with me because of all the advocacy that I did for my mom in the Social Security offices, Medicare, Medicaid. I used to go up a 16-year-old kid in front of an administrative judge and said, my mother can't be here. I don't remember what the words I used, but I think that was embedded in my head. And I think that when the lawyer came up, I said, maybe this is the right place for me. And that's when I started on my next journey to becoming a lawyer.
Yeah, I also think, like, when I think of you, like, the word courage comes to mind, right? And so courage on a couple of fronts. One, I mean, dude, look, I consider myself a brave guy, but to be as vulnerable as you are, like, it requires tremendous courage. I don't care what anybody says, to be able to tell the stories that you tell. But here's the other thing, and I say this in my context too. When you come from nothing with nothing to lose, you don't care about going on trial and trying a case. You don't care about arguing a case in front of a judge, a jury, and advocating for somebody else, right? So you have this internal courage that comes from not even knowing the alternative. You know you had a job to do for your mother, which then morphed into, wait, there's other people that need this, right? And then, like, I was always the guy, even at 5'7", I ended up getting in fistfights with people I had no business defending and getting the living shit kicked out of me. Literally, like, I can't tell you the number of concussions I've had from fights, but I couldn't really help it. I just knew, like, if I didn't like what I was seeing, having been a victim of bullying, I don't know if it was bravery or stupidity. I was like, hey, man, why are you starting with this guy? Next thing I know, I'm the guy getting beat up. The other guy runs away. I'm like, hey, you could have stuck around and helped me a little bit, you know? Right. But I think that, to Jules's point, like, and to your point, Neal, weaving it all together, it is those little moments built up with force multipliers and the right people in the right place, and then having a tribe behind you. And all of a sudden, you're into your career, 30 something years, 40 something years as a lawyer, and putting the personal in personal injury, making it not a transaction, not a number on a piece of paper, not a number in your bank account. It's about, again, going back to the title of your book, Who's in the Waiting Room. It's about the person.
And you said something really that touches on a lot of things I think about, and that is, when you come from nothing, okay, what am I losing here? Right. And I've often felt that way. Okay, so and it also has morphed into my feelings about living a relatively simple life, because my simple life is a lot better than where I came from.
Right.
There are people that I know, and I'm not knocking anybody that loves cars or anything like that, that could never drive anything but a Mercedes or a BMW. God bless. That's fine. But if you ask them to drive a Nissan or even a Cadillac, oh no, never. Right. With me, look, I like good things too. I like to travel, and as you make more money, you could do more for other people and you could do more for yourself. I get it. But it's in the simple things in life that really, make me feel great. So if I walk on the beach, I feel great. It's just it's a simple moment. It's an ordinary moment that you can make extraordinary, especially if you're with the right person. And so one of the things that you learn from having, at least in my case, having a mother that was wheelchair bound for so many years, if you took my mother out on the terrace of her apartment and she just sat there for an hour and a half, she thought she was on a Caribbean island.
Right.
And so you say to yourself, okay, are we able as human beings to enjoy levels of simplicity? And that's important.
Right.
Not everything has to be a banquet. Not
Right.
everything has to go, we have to get crazy about. How about having just a glass of wine with your partner?
Right. Just celebrating the simplest things, where it's funny because, man, you and I have a lot in common. I often say to my wife, I go, I will never forget the day my daughter was just born. It was the three of us. We were renting a house in Smithtown at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I had nothing in the bank.
Right.
My law firm was in its infancy stages, right. And I was happy. And that's why I said, like, it doesn't matter how big I grow this monstrosity of a law firm. It doesn't matter how much money I make. I was happy with zero, and I could always be happy with zero. And the other thing I knew, when you have zero, the one thing they can't take away from you, and I learned this through my martial arts as well, is they can't take away your skills. So if you're skilled and you care, you'll always be able to feed yourself. Mm-hmm. You'll always be able to feed yourself. 100%. You can't get obsessed with the car you drive or the number of zeros in your bank account, because that's all bullshit. It all, as quick as you make it, it could go away. But if you're comfortable in your own skin and skills and you care about other people, that's your whole message, man. It's about the people. It's about the tribe. It's about the people in your life.
Yeah.
100%. For the attorneys that are listening to this, it's funny too, because Neal, people come up to me now. They're like, I want to go into personal injury. I'm like, what's your motivation for doing it? Right? Like, if you tell me money, you're in it for the wrong reasons. You're in it for the wrong reason. You can make some money, but if you're not in it for the people, for the person on the other side of the phone or the desk or the courtroom, you won't last. And you definitely won't beat somebody like me that really gives a excuse my language, bleep it out, Jules, but who gives a about his client. You're not going to beat me. You're just not, because I care. And I don't care about the money. I'll go balls to the wall if I have to. It doesn't matter.
Right.
So your message is one that really needs to be spread. That's why I wanted to have you on, because I know you're mentoring young attorneys. I think that's really good. They need a voice like yours, right? To say, hey, we could talk about the business. We could talk about the money. Why are you doing this? What's your motivation? It better be because you want to help people. And that was kind of your message to the mastermind, right? Like, hey, man, make it about the people. And so, I mean, dude, that's what makes you just such a, first of all, you're at this point where you're giving back so much to the community. You're doing a tremendous amount on Instagram, and your book. And by the way, don't think I didn't see your face when you mentioned a movie. So is there a movie in the talks? Are you allowed to talk about it?
Well, probably not, but there is somebody out there that expressed an interest, and obviously you understand these things are very hard to ever come to fruition.
Right.
So I don't think that's going to happen, but you never know.
Listen, I think that the fact that look, New Yorkers are known countrywide. New York attorneys, especially, are just known kind of built differently. Most New York attorneys, and I think that New York attorneys with your background, again, that just makes you a different kind of person. Your story is really interesting, and it's got some real deep value for people that actually plug in and pay attention. If they see the title of this, and I don't have a title for it yet, but we could call it Who's in the Waiting Room with Neal, or it's about the people, dummy. Like, hey, you're in personal injury. I'm in personal injury. Personal injury, not money injury, not financial injury, personal injury. And so, listen, I think your message is needed at this time, especially when connection is so hard to maintain, and authenticity is like, it's kind of like an afterthought to most people.
I'll just add this one thing also. About 6 months ago, the Surgeon General came out with a report, basically advising the country of a new health alert. No, it's not COVID. That's over. But a new health alert. And the health alert was the dangerous situation going on, particularly with young people, but also older people, regarding isolation and being disconnected with other human beings. And they specifically talk about political institutions. We could understand that. Cultural institutions, civic institutions, political institutions. Okay, we could understand all of those things. And it doesn't talk about businesses or lawyers. But we can't be so ignorant to think that if the same study was done with clients or former clients of lawyers, that clients wouldn't have the same disaffection or disconnection with their lawyers. It's the most common complaint amongst clients is lack of communication, lack of respect, not knowing what's going on, and it continues. Yes, there's a growing number of lawyers like us who are trying to change that, but still the majority of lawyers don't get it. And that's okay. There's nothing I could do about that, but I'm always going to do whatever I can do to make sure that I'm not in that group.
Look, and again, that's why I brought up the Millennial Mastermind function. Is there a formal name to your coaching program? I don't know the formal name of it. I know you have a website. What's the website?
You can go to truthinsuccess.com. Truthinsuccess.com.
Awesome. And you have, and basically your demographic special concentration is millennial lawyers.
Yeah,
right?
this just so you understand. So I'm still practicing law, and I'm still, I wrote my book, and I did this 8-level video course for people that might be interested in learning how to grow their practice organically through relationships as opposed to spending $10,000, $50,000 a month on Google AdWords.
Right.
And if I could share the knowledge with some people, that would be great. So I'm trying to do multiple things now because I have pivoted a little bit in my day-to-day practice to doing other things.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the business model in a second, but it's funny because I just purchased Mark Cuban's masterclass. They have those masterclasses.
Yeah, sure.
And he said something so poignant, so poignant. Now, this is a guy who's one of the wealthiest guys,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Bajillionaire, basically.
Right.
And he said, I'm in the trust business.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, did that resonate with me?
Yeah.
Because he started this company, Cost Drugs or Cost Plus Drugs, where he takes the cost of the drugs that he gets and he marks them up 15%. I'm a huge fan. I think he is going to disrupt the pharmaceutical industry.
That's great.
And listening to him talk about it, when he said, I'm in the trust business, he does not believe in buying sales. He believes in building a brand of transparency, competency, and trust.
Yeah.
And man, if that isn't exactly what you're talking about, I don't know what is, right? Like, and again, we all have to do, we know you're going to do some measure of SEO. Jules and I have now gone on a different path journey with SEO. And I told her, like, I'm not going to do the rat race of buying sales when I know that our brand is built on trust. People trust us and the things we say because we're direct, we're forthright, we pick up the phone.
And let's not kid each other. You want quick results, then take 50,000 and start spending it every month on all kinds of SEO and Google AdWords. But if you want a longer term investment for a lot less money, and where all your clients become fans of yours, where they start talking about you to other people, which is much better than any Google or product that you could ad that you could ever have.
Right.
That's the real way to become successful in any business. Certainly I could talk about law, but really in any business.
Right.
I think I talked about the dentist that I had years ago growing up.
You did. Tell that story. Tell the story because I loved it.
So nobody knows this guy's name. He probably doesn't know I'm talking about him. He's gone. His name is Dr. Rayner. I met him when I was 13. He knew my grandmother because my mother couldn't take me. My grandmother took me to the dentist, and he pulled my teeth. That's all I remember. And I started going to him. When my grandmother passed away, I was still going to him. When I went back to college, or I went to college, I was still going to him. When I went to law school and became a lawyer, I was still going to him. And he was 2 hours away from me, an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I lived. I didn't have to go to him. I knew other dentists. I had money to go to other dentists also. So why did I go to him? Why did I go back to Dr. Rayner? His answer is very simple. Because when I walked into that waiting room, and there was other people there waiting, first of all, he would open the door, not one of his, assistants. He would open up the door and he'd say, Neal, come on in. And as soon as I walked in, he put his arm around me and he'd say, how you doing? He treated me, I felt like I was 13 still. And then he would talk to me about my grandmother. He related in a way that was real, authentic. Did I know whether he got an A+ in dental school in dental extraction? Did I really give a shit? No, I knew that he didn't hurt me, that he always did what I thought was a competent job. And he made me feel like I was the only person in that office.
As you were saying that and saying that last sentence, I was about to jump in and I didn't want to interrupt you. I'm trying to be a much better listener as I surround myself with people like you and Bill Umansky, who are probably the best listeners I could learn from, and you ask great questions. But I was about to say he sees you. He saw you. Oh, yeah. So run with that a little bit for me, because you talk about the importance of listening with your heart. And I have to tell you that it's transformed my approach to interpersonal communications and connections. I still suck at it, if I'm being honest. And Jules and I read a book Jules, you'll
Talk
bleep it
about
out
all the
again.
time.
You'll bleep
Just
it out
say
again.
STFU.
Shut the fuck up, right? The name of the book is Shut the Fuck Up. And basically the premise of it is what can happen when you're just talking, and not listening with your heart. So talk about listening with your heart and how you became so good at it, because I'd love to learn from you about it. But what does it mean? Define it, and the importance of listening with your heart, making people feel seen and heard.
Well, I mean, the nature of our business, when you think about it, being a personal injury lawyer in particular, is listening, to somebody else's challenges that they're going through. Unfortunately, many lawyers uh, go into those types of conversations with the intent not on listening, but on talking. So they're already thinking about what am I going to say? How am I going to respond without even hearing what somebody else is saying, without looking at how the other person is physically talking to you. When I say physically talking to you, when people talk to me in my conference room, when I talk to a client, whether I'm sitting at Starbucks with them, in the office conference room, wherever, they're usually talking to me with their hands. Maybe they're talking to me with no hands. Their hands are folded. That happens a lot with younger people. Maybe they're talking to me and their voice goes up at a particular moment, which you have to see and hear. Maybe they're talking very low, and maybe there's a reason for that. And if you're not listening, not only with your ears, but with your eyes and your soul, takes time to do that, it's hard, then you're never going to really understand what somebody's going through. And how could you be a good advocate, a good trial lawyer? The best moments I've had in court, or the mediation even, is when I am able to literally stand in the shoes of the client and tell whether it's a judge or a jury or in a mediation, somebody exactly what the client is going through, not just kind of like this made up bullshit. Oh, that you should know how much pain and suffering they have. Tell me what their day is like, and how else can you do that unless you're listening to somebody? And it really does take effort to do that, because, as I said, many lawyers want to be center stage, and you really have to make the client center stage. They have to feel, as you said, Tom, they have to feel like they're being seen. They have to feel like they're being heard. That's key. And many lawyers just can't put that together. Why I was able to do it, um, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. Obviously, it has something to do with empathetic skills, sympathetic skills. It became very important to me. Look, let me give you an example. I had many cases on Long Island where parents call me about bullying, and they do that because I've written a lot about bullying on Long Island. And one time, two parents came into the office, and they were both vets, and their young kid, he was at middle school at the time, was beaten daily. Kids were poking him with pencils. They were kicking him while he was down. He was bleeding when he went to the bathroom, and they went to the principal, and that principal always tries to shift it back to the victim. Well, what did he do? What would he have done to cause this, or something like that? But here's the point: when I met the kid the first time, he was sitting there like this. And I always try to talk to the kids, always try to talk to them. And I could see he was very reluctant to talk to me. One word answers, two word answers, nothing more than that. And at some point I said, I'm going to share something with him. And so I started sharing a piece of my story with him. And when I finished, or as I'm finishing, you could see he went from this to this, and he kind of smiled. And by the end of the conference, he was talking a bit more. I don't want to make it sound like I remade the kid, but I allowed him, I gave him the space, and I gave him the comfort of being able to talk to me. And you can't do that unless you're listening to what's going on and what people are going through. And maybe, just maybe you can share a moment of your own story that might be helpful. So that was a perfect situation where I listened, I heard how everybody was feeling, and I responded in a way that I thought was appropriate.
You also, it seems like, again, so anybody that's just listening to the audio only, the kid started out with his arms crossed, and by the end, after you had shared your piece of your story, exhaled and was able to open his arms. And everybody that studies any kind of linguistics or people, you know that arms crossed is a defensive posture to protect yourself.
Right.
As somebody who was severely bullied growing up, like, you're always in protection mode. Sure. You literally feel like you're under attack at any given point, right? And it isn't until you can exhale where you feel safe. Right. You made that person feel safe with your own opening up, vulnerability. And so listening with your heart, you listened, you saw, but you connected to his heart, which you knew was hurting. You knew was hurting. You know, if somebody's sitting there with their arms folded and you're hearing these horrific stories of bullying, they really just need to feel safe.
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Neal, listen, I want to be respectful of your time, and I could literally talk to you forever. And I know we're having lunch tomorrow, I think, which I'm excited about. But I just want to say thank you for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
I
I love the conversation. It's easy. It's not this typical Q&A stuff. It's really easy conversation, and I really love it. Juliet, thank you very much for helping us out here.
Yeah, and many incredible stories with us. Thank you.
Yeah, and anybody that's listening to this, pick up Neal's book, Who's in the Waiting Room. It is awesome. And I will tell you, if you get a chance to talk to Neal on social media, meet with Neal at any of the masterminds, I know he's talked about having his own podcast. You always come away a better person. You just do. I'm a better lawyer. I'm a better business owner. I'm a better person just because I know you and I've been in a room with you. And so thank you, Neal. Really.
Yes. Thank you so much.
It was really important. And if you are going to make a movie and you want to come on again, I'd love it. And if you write another book, I'll promote it. Whatever I could do, man, because I think that there's a misplaced emphasis in our field on winning at all costs, financial results at the expense of the humanity of the people behind the desk. And if I have to hear about one more lawyer who puts a gun in his mouth because he doesn't have a tribe, when there are so many great rooms out there, right? So anybody's listening to this, you reach out to somebody on social media like Neal, or I answer all my own social media.
Yep.
Because I want to connect with people. And it almost always leads to coffee, lunch, dinner, you name it. There's not a mastermind I won't attend.
And I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it anyhow. Do it. Never try to sell yourself, of course. And don't do things for an underhanded reason. Of course not. But the more you become yourself, the more you stay with people that you're comfortable with, the more honest you are, the more vulnerable you are, guess what? The more business you're going to get.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so, all right, I got to say one more thing because as I'm listening to you, you always give me more to think about. But one of the things that you have really drilled into my head, just knowing you in the short period of time I've known you, is probably less than a year, is you got to be conscious of your agenda going into any relationship. Are you going in relationally or are you going in transactionally? It's a mark of immaturity, and I can smell it from a mile away when somebody is transactional, and so can clients, and so can employees and team members and salespeople. Like, if you're going into anything like, hey, how you doing? Then the next thing out of your mouth is, I think there's a way I can help you. I didn't fucking ask for your help, man. Thanks, though. I appreciate it. But when you really show you care, you never have to worry about feeding yourself, your family, your law firm, anything else. It's just a mindset switch. And you really drill that home. Enter every conversation. Just try to get to know people.
That's correct.
Relate. Just relate. We're human beings. People want to be heard.
That's correct.
So, Neal, thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. I'm looking forward to lunch with you tomorrow. And listen, I love being in your tribe, man. I do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Jules, did you have any other questions for Neal? I know I kept him on too long, but
No
No.
other questions. Honestly, it was such a great episode. I'm really excited to hear the finished product.
yeah, I think that people that are listening to this, whether they're 20 years in or 1 year in, like normally I ask people a needle mover. Everything that Neal was talking about is a needle mover.
Everything.
Every single thing. Life is a series of little events that compound. And if you're open, it's a force multiplier that, don't worry about the other stuff. It all comes together as long as you focus on the important stuff. And that's the people in your life.
It's great. You summed it up perfectly. You said it perfectly. And good for you, because a lot of lawyers don't get that. A lot of lawyers don't get it. And you will be more successful with that type of thinking, even
Neal,
more than you are now.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend.
So
Listen,
much.
I'm excited to see you tomorrow.
Yes,
And
looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to seeing the office also.
yeah, and we'll put the links to all of the websites, your coaching program, your Instagram, all of that stuff. We'll put them in the show notes. Everybody who listens to this, and then you read about it on LinkedIn, connect with Neal. He makes people better just for knowing him. So thanks, Neal.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.